Could you give us some background on your work in the public sector in Philadelphia?
For about 25 years I've taught policy stuff at Princeton and Penn. But I've always lived in the city of Philadelphia during that whole research career. The sustainability job that the mayor asked me to take on was actually the first time, and probably the only time, I was actually in government itself.
So why were you selected to head up the creation of the Greenworks project?
The mayor asked me to lead up the policy shop during the primary campaign. So we produced over a dozen policy papers, one of which was about sustainability, was about environmental policy in the city. And the mayor was actually the first candidate to release an environmental policy paper. And about 6 months into his term, he called up and asked me to take on this sustainability job. So it's not a content area for me. I'm really not an environmentalist at all. I'm more of a kind of economic policy guy. So I come to a lot of the conclusions around sustainability kind of honestly, right? It's the analysis rather than the commitment that brings me to this stuff.
So was the mayor himself the one who conceived of the Greenworks project and pushed it through?
Fundamentally, yes. I mean, the mayor recognized the importance politically of the constituency we call the green constituency or the sustainability constituency. He recognized the critical importance of that to the politics of the city, and he also recognized the importance of green policy and green jobs as an economic strategy for the city as well. About 8 months after announcing the new position, we had Greenworks in place.
What were some of the major challenges that existed in creating the Greenworks project, and what did you do to overcome those challenges?
Well, probably the most fundamental challenge was trying to figure out a way that you could frame the cluster of issues that we put under the label of sustainability or environmental policy in a way that makes it relevant to the citizens and residents of a city like Philadelphia. We understood these set of issues to not be about polar bears, but to be about prosperity. That this is not an environmental policy framework, but it really is about an economic policy strategy. What we did to overcome that set of barriers was to, from the very beginning, to engage internal and external constituencies and partners in this. So the very first thing that the mayor did after establishing the office was to set up a sustainability advisory board. And that sustainability advisory board was, and importantly, was a mix of the usual suspects and kind of completely new people. And so we could draw on their experience and wisdom and ultimately their support for Greenworks, both in conceiving it and, importantly, in implementing it.
Are there any specific or most notable benchmarks that have been reached so far that you know of?
Yes, and in fact, that's the idea of benchmarking is fundamental. Greenworks ultimately is a set of benchmarks. What we decided to do is articulate a set of 5 big goals that we could use to engage people's interests, but also connect those 5 big goals to 15 very specific targets. And those targets have 2 important qualities. They are, first, measurable, so they're very quantified and so on. And secondly, they're actually measured. The whole thing is really about benchmarks in the end. And these benchmarks then all assemble into this framework.
Are there any direct stakeholders in the Greenworks, which is to say if a particular goal or one of the macro goals doesn't get accomplished, whose feet are going to get held to the clean coal, low emissions fire?
Right. Actually, it's one of the things that a framework like Greenworks lets you do, is each one of these targets that have been designed to achieve one or more of those 15 targets has been rated and assigned. It also allows you not just to rate the efficacy of targets, but to assign responsibility for them. When a deputy mayor walks into a room that has people from many different agencies, some of whom do not report directly to her or him, walks into a room and says, listen, I have these 4 Greenworks targets. The mayor has assigned the responsibility for achieving them to me. Here's what we need to do this. What Greenworks does is it says, you're going to be rewarded when you come come up with ideas, and more importantly, when you get up every Tuesday and work towards achieving target number 7, you're going to be rewarded for achieving that. And we're going to make it easy for us to understand that you deserve to be rewarded because there are all these measurable targets.
So has the Greenworks applied any best or living practices that they've gotten from elsewhere in the world or other cities that have been a model of green success?
We've modeled Greenworks very much on Plan YC and the Chicago Climate Action Plan. In fact, we've tried to marry some of the strength of those two approaches into a single, hybridize them into a single Greenworks framework. So we've learned not just on our strategic approach for how to do a plan, but also on some of the specific elements. We've had to modify a lot of these imports, but we've been very open to ideas.
So do you think the Greenworks has been publicized enough or is well known enough outside of Philadelphia to really contribute to a new image and a new reputation of Philadelphia as a green city?
People often would ask me, you know, how are you going to know you're the greenest city in America? Part of the answer is that by leading with Greenworks, by establishing 15, which really no other city has done to the extent that Philadelphia did, by articulating these 15 very measurable things, what we've tried to do actually is establish the game that everyone should be playing to determine who is going to become the greenest city in America.
From your view from the outside of the project now, do you think the inception of it was a success, and do you think that the direction it's going in right now has been successful?
Yes, and yes. I think that you know, we took a little bit of a risk, right? First of all, saying from the very beginning that we would begin this process with a written framework.
Do you think the Greenworks is breaking ground in any way as far as sustainability?
Yes, in fact, I think we're literally breaking ground. I think probably the thing that if we were able to do this one thing alone would probably earn us the mantle of greenest city in America. And that, I'm speaking in particular of the effort being led by the Philadelphia Water Department to invest $1.5 billion in a new green infrastructure program. In Philadelphia, we are pioneering a completely different approach that says if you keep water out of the pipes to begin with, you don't need to build bigger ones. How do you keep water out of the pipes to begin with? You invest in green infrastructure. Green roofs, tree pits, bioswales, porous surfaces that we use to cover our parking lots and basketball courts. So, by investing in this green infrastructure program, not only do we deal with our stormwater management problem, but we deal with many, many other related problems for the same dollar of investment. So I think this is one of the ways in which we are literally and conceptually breaking very important ground that I expect most cities in America to eventually take as standard practice.
Given the age of Philadelphia and the age of a lot of the infrastructure, do you think it is realistic for Philadelphia to become the greenest city in the United States?
In many ways, our old infrastructure is a great advantage in exactly this competition to become the greenest city in America. Philadelphia, of course, is in many ways the world's largest transit-oriented development. The whole city is a network of small walkable streets connected with a dense system of regional rail. The reason why Philadelphia's got narrow, walkable streets is not because somebody thinks, wow, what a cool amenity. It's that we inherited this infrastructure, these assets. For 100 years, those assets were depreciating in value. In a period of rising energy costs, all of those things that had been liabilities are now appreciating assets. And so we are extremely well positioned to compete for the first time based not on our weakness, but on our strength for being able to manage energy costs. The Philadelphia row house is the most energy efficient building type, residential building type ever invented. Our street system is perfect for not just walking, but for having all kinds of modal choice across bikes, cars, buses, trains, subways, trolleys. Being able to have those choices and that kind of different modal options, really, the redundancy for how you get from A to B, helps us create a plan for a future that reduces our vulnerability to rising energy costs or whatever the future may bring. So in fact, it's exactly our oldness, it's exactly our good bones, our inherited assets that positions us to compete against other cities in the future.